The knock came one quiet Thursday morning, a week after my son's wedding. I was in the kitchen folding clean dish towels when I heard the sharp rhythm of heels on my porch. 3 precise clicks, a pause, and then another knock. When I opened the door, there stood my new daughter-in-law, Brianna, her perfect smile polished like a showroom car. Beside her was a man in a tailored suit, holding a sleek leather briefcase. "Hi, Evelyn," Brianna said, her tone syrupy and brittle at once. "This is Caleb Morton, the notary I told you about. We just need your signature on a few little papers for the house." Little papers. My hands went cold. I didn't even have to look at the briefcase to know what was inside. I'd seen this coming since the wedding, since the moment she looked around my home as if the walls embarrassed her. But she didn't know what I had been keeping to myself all these months. If I had ever opened my mouth about my late husband's estate, I would have lost everything. Thank God I'd kept silent, because watching Brianna's sharp eyes skim the framed photos in my hallway, I understood that my silence had been my armor. But to explain how we got here, I have to go back to the day it all began to change. 3 months before the wedding, when Daniel told me he was getting married. The visit. That afternoon, I was kneading bread on my old oak counter, the smell of yeast warm in the air, the radio humming something soft from the 70s. When Daniel walked in, smiling that boyish smile that could still melt me, he said, "Mom, I really want you to get to know Brianna before the wedding." "Of course, honey," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. "Bring her whenever you like." He told me she worked in a law office downtown, 32, smart, stylish, his dream woman. He spoke with the tenderness of a man in love, and I wanted to believe that she'd love him the same way. That evening, I rushed to the market for his favorite ingredients: fresh shrimp, avocados, poblanos, thick cream. I wanted dinner to taste like comfort and celebration all at once. I stayed up half the night cooking, my back aching, feet swollen, heart happy. The next day, I laid everything out carefully. Cornbread like clouds, green salsa with the perfect kick, the house clean and smelling of lime and bread. I slipped into my prettiest pink dress, the one I used to wear when my husband was alive, and even dabbed on lipstick. I wanted to make a good first impression. When the doorbell finally rang, I wiped my hands, smiled wide, and opened the door. "Brianna, what a pleasure to meet you," I said, arms open for a hug. But she leaned in only halfway, brushing my shoulder with her fingertips as if I were contagious. "Nice to meet you, ma'am," she murmured without meeting my eyes. Her perfume filled the entryway, expensive, cold. The green dress she wore shimmered under the light, her heels clicking on my linoleum like a metronome counting down to judgment. Dinner I tried. God knows I tried. I asked about her job, her hobbies, her family. Every answer was clipped short, sealed like a letter that said, "Mind your own business." Yes, no, maybe. Daniel smiled nervously, trying to fill the air with chatter, but it was like talking to ice. And when she tasted my food, she wrinkled her nose ever so slightly. The shrimp, the cornbread, the salsa, my entire history in flavors, reduced to an experiment she didn't want to repeat. "Mom, this is delicious," Daniel said, his voice too bright. Brianna pushed her beans around with the tip of her fork. Her nails, perfect crimson ovals, stood out against my chipped plates. "Do you like to cook, Brianna?" I asked hopefully. She looked up, expression unreadable. "I don't have time for those things," she said. "We prefer to order in or go to decent restaurants." Decent. The word sliced through me like a fine knife. My kitchen wasn't decent. My food wasn't decent. I wasn't decent. Daniel coughed and changed the subject, but the verdict had been delivered. The distance. The weeks after that visit felt like standing in a room where the temperature kept dropping. When they came by, Brianna perched on the edge of the sofa, scrolling her phone, legs crossed, polished heels never touching my worn rug. Once, While I poured coffee, she said lightly, "You must be happy you'll have more time for yourself once we're married." More time for myself. It sounded less like kindness and more like a relocation notice. "The wedding will keep you busy," I replied, pretending not to understand. She smiled faintly, exchanged a look with Daniel. I couldn't read back then, but I do now. They were already planning how to place me at a safe distance. The wedding. The morning of the wedding arrived like a bright lie. I rose before dawn, slipped into my new purple dress, the one Linda from the salon said made me look 10 years younger. "You'll glow today, Evelyn," she said. "Daniel's going to be so proud." I wanted to believe her. At the church, I arrived early as always. The air smelled of lilies and floor polish. Guests drifted in, friends, co-workers, neighbors. Everyone smiling, hugging, asking if I was proud. And I was. I truly was. Until the usher handed me a program with my seat number, row 5. I blinked, thinking it was a mistake. But when the music started, I found myself squeezed between two of Brianna's work friends, both whispering about the honeymoon. From where I sat, I had to crane my neck just to glimpse my son at the altar. Row 5. Behind strangers. Behind mothers who had never held my son through fevers or nightmares. The ceremony blurred into a polite ache. When the vows ended, people clapped. And I clapped too, though I felt invisible. At the reception, Brianna introduced me as Daniel's mom, the way one might point to a relic. "She's the one who cooks really well," she added, with a practiced smile. I was a footnote at my own son's wedding, the toast. I waited for my turn. I had prepared something beautiful, a few words about love lasting beyond loss, about the home Daniel came from. I kept the note in my purse, folded like a secret blessing. When the moment came, Brianna gave her father the mic, then her sister, her best friend, her boss. Someone asked, "What about the groom's mom?" "Oh, of course," Brianna said with a flash of teeth. "Evelyn, would you like to say something? Quick, quick, before dessert." Laughter. Polite applause. I stood, my knees trembling. "I just want to thank God." Clapping erupted mid-sentence. Brianna's doing. She started it like an MC wrapping up an act that had gone on too long. My voice vanished under the noise. I sat back down. Someone squeezed my shoulder. Pity, not respect. The dance dinner tasted like cardboard. I sat at a back table with distant relatives of hers who talked over me. When the band began to play, Daniel danced with Brianna, then her mother, then her sisters. I waited, smiled, fixed my dress, tried not to hope. "Isn't he going to dance with you?" my old friend Anthony asked softly. Daniel glanced my way, half smile, guilty eyes. "Yeah, soon, Mom, promise." But the song ended, and another began. He never came. Around 11, I rose quietly. "Honey, I'm going to head out," I said, touching his arm. He hugged me quickly, distracted. "Thanks for everything, Mom. Love you." Brianna appeared like a shadow beside him. "Thanks for coming, Evelyn. Drive safe." Her tone was smooth as glass, and just as cold. As I walked to my car, I heard her laugh to her friends. Thank God she lives all the way across town. Not that she's a bad person, but you know, mothers-in-law. Their laughter followed me into the night, the drive home. I gripped the wheel, the road shimmering through tears. For 34 years, Daniel had been the center of my world. And now, overnight, I'd become an inconvenience. A song came on the radio, one my late husband and I used to dance to in our kitchen. I could almost feel his hand at my back, guiding me, whispering, "Don't let them walk over you, Evie." By the time I reached home, the purple dress felt heavy, foolish. I slipped off my shoes at the door and stood barefoot on the cool tile. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the old wall clock. Every tick sounded like a reminder. The world had changed. and I wasn't invited along. But deep down, beneath the ache and humiliation, something small stirred, a pulse of anger, a breath of defiance. I didn't know it yet, but that tiny heartbeat was the beginning of everything that came next. For 3 days after the wedding, the house stayed eerily quiet. No phone calls, no messages. No, "Mom, how are you?" The silence itself began to hum, a low ache that filled every room. I'd catch myself setting 2 coffee cups instead of one, then quietly put one back. When I couldn't bear it anymore, I picked up the phone. "Hi, honey. How was the honeymoon?" I asked, trying to sound cheerful. Daniel's voice was distracted. "Great, Mom. Brianna says hi. Listen, we're just busy settling some things with the house." The house. Not our home, not your house, just the house. I hung up, staring at the receiver as if it had betrayed me. Around the living room, the pictures of Daniel as a child stared back. His first steps, his 8th birthday, his graduation. Each frame suddenly felt like a museum piece from a life that had ended. 3 more days. No word. Then I decided to do something mothers have done for centuries when their hearts are breaking. I baked. The cookie visit. I spent the morning making his favorite cookies, chocolate chip with walnuts, still warm and soft inside. I tied the basket with a yellow ribbon and wore my prettiest mint blouse. The drive across town felt longer than it used to. When I rang the doorbell, Brianna opened the door in a silk robe the color of wine. Her hair was perfectly pinned, her perfume heavy enough to sting my eyes. "Oh, Evelyn, what a surprise," she said flatly. "I brought cookies for Daniel," I explained, lifting the basket. "They're his favorite." She took it, barely glancing inside. "How thoughtful. He's in a meeting, something very important. I'll tell him you stopped by." She didn't invite me in, didn't even offer me a glass of water, just smiled with that perfect plastic curve and closed the door. The sound of it, a polite final click, echoed down to my bones. I drove a few blocks before pulling over, sobbing into my hands. For 34 years, I had built my life around loving a child. And now, that love was an inconvenience. When I finally calmed down, I remembered something my late husband, Frank, had told me before he passed. "Evie, promise me something. Don't let anyone walk over you. You're stronger than you think, and you have more than you imagine." At the time, I thought he meant emotional strength. But that night, lying awake in the stillness, I began to wonder, what had he meant by more than you imagine? The safe box. The next morning, I went to my bedroom closet and reached for the old metal safe box we'd kept since the kids were little. Its corners were scuffed, the handle cool in my trembling hand. I hadn't opened it in years. I carried it to the dining table, set it down, and twisted the combination lock. 3 turns left, 1 right, 1 more left. The latch clicked open. Inside were decades of life, birth certificates, insurance policies, our marriage license. Receipts yellowed with time. A photo of Frank at 30, smiling by the tractor on his uncle's ranch. And then, beneath a stack of papers, an envelope sealed with wax. My breath caught. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable, Frank's. Inside lay a thick document, a deed. The property description alone filled half a page. Arroyo Cielo Ranch, Section 47, 512 acres. For a second, I couldn't make sense of it. My husband's uncle had owned that land, a sprawling estate near Socorro, but I thought it had been sold years ago. At the bottom of the page was a notarized transfer, signed by his uncle and Frank, witnessed, filed, and after Frank's death, updated to Evelyn Hart, sole owner. My mouth went dry. There were additional pages, an appraisal report, tax documents, even photos. A long adobe house, fenced pastures, a river cutting through the land. According to the most recent valuation, it was worth over $4 million. I sat there in stunned silence, staring at the figures until they blurred. Frank hadn't just left me memories. He'd left me independence, the realization. For years, I'd lived like a woman afraid of running out, afraid to break the savings account, to ask for help. But here it was, a lifeline I hadn't known existed, and suddenly, every look Brianna had given me made sense. The cold politeness, the quick change of subject whenever money was mentioned. She wasn't just marrying Daniel, she was hunting stability, and I had become the unguarded treasure chest. That realization burned through me, not in rage, but in clarity. I folded the documents carefully, placed them back in the safe, and locked it. Then I whispered aloud, to no one and to Frank, "Thank you. I'll handle it from here." The calls. Begin. It started subtly. Brianna's voice on the phone, honey-sweet but probing. "How are you, Evelyn? I was just thinking. Isn't that house a lot to manage for one person? You could really enjoy life more in a smaller place." "Oh, I like it here," I replied calmly. "It's quiet." "But think about it," she insisted. "You could sell, maybe travel. Daniel and I could help you invest the money so it lasts. You'd never have to worry again." I could almost see the gleam in her eye through the phone line. 2 days later, Daniel came over. The first time since the wedding. He looked uncomfortable the moment he stepped inside. "Mom," he began, sitting on the couch where he'd once built Lego castles. "Brianna and I have been talking about your future." "My future." "You seem tired lately," he said, avoiding my eyes. "This house is a lot of work. Brianna knows a great realtor who could get you a good price. Maybe move you somewhere easier to manage." I studied his face. He wasn't cruel, just lost, pulled into someone else's script. "Do you really think I should sell the house, Daniel?" He hesitated. For a second, the boy I'd raised flickered behind his eyes. Then he looked away. "I just want what's best for you, Mom." The line was rehearsed. The betrayal wasn't. A plan of my own. That night, I brewed chamomile tea and sat at the table, hands trembling. But this time, not from grief, from decision. I picked up the phone and called the only person I could truly trust. "Martha, it's me." Her voice on the other end was steady as ever. "Evie, you sound shaken. I need to tell you something important, but you have to promise me it stays between us." "Of course." I told her everything. The wedding, the cold stares, the pressure to sell, the discovery of the ranch. There was a long pause. Then she said, "Good Lord, Evelyn, a 500-acre estate, and you never told them." "No, and now I know why." "Then listen carefully," Martha said, her nurse's tone taking over. "Tomorrow morning, I'm picking you up. We're going to see a lawyer." The lawyer. The next day we met David Chen, a gray-haired elder law attorney whose office smelled of coffee and polished wood. He listened quietly as I spoke. "Mrs. Hart," he said finally, "what you're describing fits a very familiar pattern. Emotional isolation, undermining confidence, pressure to transfer assets, all common in what we call undue influence cases." His words felt like a light turning on in a dark room. "What can I do?" I asked. "A lot," he replied. "We'll start by protecting everything you own. An irrevocable trust for the ranch, updated powers of attorney with limited scope, and from now on, document any conversation that feels manipulative." He slid a small digital recorder across the desk. "New Mexico's a one-party consent state. You can record anyone speaking to you." I nodded, the first spark of power returning to my chest. "Also," he added, "don't sign anything. Not a scrap of paper, not an email, without running it by me." Martha squeezed my hand. "We'll handle this smartly, Evie." The hidden fire. That evening, I drove home with the recorder in my purse and the lawyer's card tucked safely inside my wallet. The sunset washed the road in gold, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel invisible. I felt like a woman preparing for battle, quiet, strategic, and patient. When I reached home, I opened the windows wide. The air smelled of rain and distant sagebrush. I poured a cup of tea, looked around the house Brianna thought she could steal, and whispered, "Let's see how decent you think I am now." In the hush that followed, the ticking clock didn't sound lonely anymore. It sounded like a countdown, steady, deliberate, waiting for the right moment. I had my proof. I had my plan. And I had my spine back. The next time they came for my signature, they'd find a very different woman waiting. For 3 weeks, I lived in a strange calm, the kind that comes before a storm you can already smell in the air. Brianna's voice began showing up more often on my caller ID. At first, she spoke like a loving daughter-in-law, sweet, soft, syrupy. But her sweetness always had an aftertaste. "Evelyn, dear, how are you feeling these days?" she'd begin. "Fine, thank you, Brianna. Just baking a bit." "Oh, that's wonderful," she'd say, voice tightening like a wire. "You know, Daniel and I have been thinking. You must get tired taking care of that big house all alone. Wouldn't it be nice to have less to worry about?" I'd smile at the phone like she could see me. "Oh, I manage. I like the space." "Well," she'd continue, her tone all fake concern, "maybe it's time to simplify. You deserve freedom. We could help with the logistics, agents, paperwork, investments." Every call circled the same point. Let go of the house. But behind her, "We just want what's best." I could hear the steady rhythm of greed. And I, smiling and nodding, recorded every single word. The arrival. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Daniel's car pulled into my driveway. My heart tightened. I knew this visit wasn't spontaneous. Nothing was anymore. When he stepped out, he looked tired. Not physically, but morally. He had the hollow-eyed look of a man caught between love and guilt. "Hi, Mom," he said, hugging me quickly. "We wanted to check on you." We. Brianna followed behind him, her perfume arriving 3 seconds before she did. She carried a thick folder and the kind of smile you wear when you're about to close a deal. "Evelyn," she said brightly, "we brought something that could really help you. Can we come in?" I wanted to tell them no, but my lawyer's advice echoed in my head. Don't resist. Let them talk. Get it all on record. "Of course," I said sweetly, stepping aside. They settled in the living room, the same space where Daniel had once sprawled on the carpet with his toy trucks. I sat in my armchair, hands folded, playing my role of the kind but confused older woman. The script. Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, we've been worried. You've seemed overwhelmed lately." "Oh?" I asked, feigning mild confusion. He nodded, glancing at Brianna for reassurance. "It's normal, at your age, to feel tired. The house, the bills, the yard work, it's a lot." "Maybe," I said softly, "but it keeps me busy." "That's just it," Brianna cut in smoothly. "You shouldn't have to keep busy with chores and stress. You've done enough. It's time to enjoy life." She laid the folder on my coffee table with a theatrical flourish. Color brochures spilled out. Glossy pictures of smiling seniors in manicured gardens. "Look," she said, sliding one toward me. "Silver Palms Retirement Community. They have yoga classes, movie nights, even a cafe." I stared at the photo of a woman in a cardigan laughing beside a fountain. The background looked sterile, too bright, too polished, like a hospital pretending to be a home. "That's very nice," I murmured, "but I'm fine here." "Oh, Evelyn," she sighed, tilting her head in mock sympathy. "You say that now, but what if something happens? What if you fall? Or someone takes advantage of you? We just want you safe." There it was again, the weaponized concern, the investment pitch. Daniel leaned forward, his voice low and soothing, the way he used to talk to nervous clients at his sales job. "Mom, listen. We've talked to some specialists in finance for retirees. They all recommend consolidating assets. You'd have guaranteed income, no more maintenance headaches." "Specialists," I echoed. Yes, Brianna said quickly, flipping through her folder. They said the best plan would be to sell the house, invest the money into a family trust. Daniel and I would help manage it. That way, you're protected from scams or, confusion. Confusion. I pressed my hands together to hide their trembling. Not from fear, but fury. I see, I said after a pause. And where would I live while all this is happening? Oh, don't worry, Brianna said, all teeth. We've already found you a place at Silver Palms. They have a lovely spot available, but we have to reserve it soon. There's a waiting list. Reserve it soon. They were even trying to rush me like a limited-time offer. I forced a shaky laugh. Well, you've certainly done your homework. Daniel smiled, relieved that I wasn't protesting. We just want to take the pressure off you, Mom. It's too much for you alone. I suppose, I said softly, pretending to consider it. Maybe I should take a look. Inside, I was boiling, but I stayed calm, recording every word. The trap unfolds. Brianna pulled out more papers, spreading them like a deck of cards. Here's the draft contract. It's very straightforward. You'd sign here to allow us to list the house, then here to transfer the proceeds into the family account. Daniel and I would have joint decision-making, just to handle things efficiently. Joint decision-making, meaning they'd own me. She kept talking, her words a smooth river of deceit. This way, you'll never have to worry about bills, repairs, or, heaven forbid, someone tricking you. The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. Daniel nodded, eyes darting between us like a referee. Think about how peaceful it'll be, Mom. You'll have company, medical staff, activities, and we'll visit whenever we can, whenever they could. I imagined them showing up twice a year, waving politely before leaving to spend my money. I said, rubbing my temples like the frail woman they thought I was. That's a lot to process. Could I have a little time? Of course, Daniel said quickly, standing up. Take all the time you need. Not too long, Brianna interrupted with a practiced laugh. Opportunities like this don't wait forever. I looked at her, at the ambition gleaming in her eyes, and smiled faintly. I understand. They left soon after, Brianna clutching her folder like a trophy. I watched their car disappear down the street, the recorder warm in my pocket. The long night. When the house finally fell silent again, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the space they'd occupied. My tea had gone cold. My body was shaking, not from weakness, but from restrained rage. My own son had become the salesman of my undoing. I walked through the house, touching each piece of furniture, each memory. The piano Frank had played, the table Daniel had once carved his initials into, the worn banister smooth under my hand. They wanted to erase all this for efficiency. I poured myself a fresh cup of tea, breathing in the steam. Then I reached for my phone and dialed David Chen. The counter call. He answered on the second ring. Mrs. Hart? They came, I said quietly, with papers. They want me to sell everything and move to a retirement home. Did you record it? Yes. Good, he said. His voice was steady, like an anchor. Now comes the important part. Don't sign anything. And if they come again, keep the recorder running the entire time. We'll build a timeline. Every word counts. Are they really breaking the law? I asked. They're walking the line, he said. But if we document intent, pressure, manipulation, financial interest, we can prove coercion. Trust me, you're doing everything right. When I hung up, I felt the weight of something shift. I wasn't just a target anymore. I was a witness preparing her evidence. The preparation. The next morning, Martha arrived with a small black device no bigger than a lipstick tube. It records 8 hours straight, she said, slipping it into my palm. Press once to start, once to stop. Keep it in your apron pocket. If they come back, we'll have them on tape. Her confidence steadied me more than she could know. For 3 days, I waited, watered my plants, read the paper. Baked a batch of banana bread, just to feel normal. Then, late Friday afternoon, the phone rang again. Mother-in-law. Brianna's honeyed voice purred. Have you had time to think about our proposal? The spot at Silver Palms won't stay open forever. I let my voice tremble just slightly. Oh yes, dear. I've been thinking a lot. Maybe you and Daniel could come by tomorrow. You could explain everything again. I want to make sure I understand before signing. There was a pause. Then that unmistakable spark of triumph in her tone. Of course, Evelyn. We'll stop by tomorrow afternoon. Caleb, our notary friend, can come too. It'll be easier to have everything ready. Perfect. Wonderful, I said, forcing a frail laugh. At my age, I forget things so easily. Best to have it all explained slowly. She laughed politely. Don't worry, we'll take care of everything. When I hung up, I placed the phone on the table, exhaled, and smiled. The hunters thought they were coming to close the deal. They had no idea I'd already set the trap. Saturday afternoon came bright and windless, too peaceful for what I knew was coming. The house smelled of lemon polish and coffee, the table cleared, the curtains half drawn. I'd arranged the living room exactly as David Chen suggested. Nothing valuable within reach, every surface neat, nothing to distract. On the side table, hidden beneath my folded apron, sat the tiny recorder. Its red light blinked once before vanishing, invisible but alive. At 2 o'clock sharp, the crunch of tires sounded outside. My stomach tightened, but my hands stayed steady as I poured myself a cup of coffee. Then came the doorbell, crisp, deliberate. When I opened the door, Brianna was standing there in a cream suit that probably cost more than my first car. Behind her, Daniel looked stiff, eyes shadowed, and trailing them like a faithful hound was Caleb Morton, the notary, his leather briefcase gleaming. "Evelyn," Brianna said brightly, her smile stretched too wide. "We're right on time." "I can see that," I replied softly, stepping aside. "Come in." The stage is set. They filed into the living room, Caleb already glancing around like an appraiser. His eyes darted to the photographs on the wall, the furniture, the polished floors, calculating value without a word. "Let's sit here," Brianna said, taking the spot beside me on the couch, the air around her perfumed with lilies and ambition. Daniel perched on the edge of the armchair, fidgeting with his car keys. Caleb set the briefcase on the coffee table and clicked it open. The metallic snap sounded like a gun being cocked. "I've brought everything ready to go, Mrs. Hart," he said in his smooth, professional voice. "All you'll need to do is sign a few documents, right here, here, and here, and I'll notarize them on the spot. Quick and simple." I folded my hands in my lap. "That's very efficient." "Efficiency is everything," Brianna murmured. "The theater of concern." Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, we really just want to make sure you're comfortable. You deserve to relax." "Yes," Brianna added quickly, opening her folder. "Here's the agreement for selling this property, and here's the trust form for transferring the funds. You'll still have access to spending money, of course. We'll just manage the rest." "Manage the rest," I repeated softly. "How generous." "Mom," Daniel said with a faint laugh, "you know I'd never let anything happen to you." I smiled at him. That same soft mother's smile I used to give when he tried to hide broken toys behind his back. "I know, sweetheart. I trust you completely." I almost pitied him. Almost. The retirement home reveal. "Oh," Brianna said suddenly, snapping her fingers. "I almost forgot. We have photos of the place you'll be staying." She reached into the folder and pulled out glossy pictures of Silver Palms retirement community. Bright walls, spotless gardens, strangers smiling at bingo tables. "Isn't it lovely?" she said, handing me the brochure. "You'll have your own room, 24-hour medical care, and staff on call. It's completely safe." "Safe from what?" I asked gently. Her smile didn't flicker. "From, well, anything that could go wrong here. You're alone too often. What if you fell or forgot to lock the door? It's really for your peace of mind. I looked at Daniel. You agree with this? He hesitated, then nodded slowly. It's for the best, Mom. You'll be comfortable there. We'll visit every week. Every week, I echoed. That sounds nice. Inside, my pulse was pounding like a drum, but outwardly, I was calm. The recorder was catching every word, every false kindness. The pen. Caleb cleared his throat and pulled out a gold pen from his jacket. Shall we begin? The gold glinted in the light, a small, harmless object, yet it looked like a weapon. He spread the papers before me, the property transfer, the trust account authorization, and the care consent for the facility. Each dotted line looked like a cross, waiting to mark a grave. Mrs. Hart, Caleb said smoothly, these forms are perfectly standard. Once you sign, we'll take care of the rest. You won't have to lift a finger. How kind of you, I said softly. I let my hand tremble just enough to look hesitant. And if I change my mind later? Brianna laughed, that quick patronizing sound. Oh, Evelyn, don't worry. These decisions are final for your own protection. You wouldn't want someone confusing you later, would you? Her words burned like acid. I picked up the pen slowly, staring at it. The room fell into an expectant hush. The doorbell. Then, salvation. The doorbell rang. A sharp, clear sound that sliced through the tension. Brianna frowned. Are you expecting someone? No, I said mildly, setting the pen down. Maybe a neighbor. I stood and walked to the door. When I opened it, the afternoon sunlight poured in, and standing there was Martha, her eyes steady as steel. Beside her was David Chen, briefcase in hand, and a third man, tall, serious, holding a video camera. Good afternoon, Evelyn, David said, his voice calm and professional. I hope we're not interrupting. Not at all, I said with a smile. Please, come in. The color drained from Brianna's face. The visitors. Hello, everyone, David greeted pleasantly as he entered. I'm David Chen, Mrs. Hart's attorney. And this is Mr. Herrera from the County District Attorney's Office, Elder Abuse Division. He's assisting with some local cases. Daniel's mouth fell open. Caleb froze, his gold pen suspended midair. Brianna's lips parted in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, what a coincidence. We were just helping Evelyn with... David raised a hand. Yes, I can see that. We just wanted to ensure my client has proper legal supervision while signing any important documents. He set his briefcase beside Caleb's, the gesture quiet but absolute, like planting a flag. The unmasking. A silence thick enough to choke on filled the room. Caleb tried to recover his composure, closing his briefcase slowly. Mrs. Hart invited me as a notary to witness. Mr. Herrera stepped forward, calm and firm. We'd like to take a look at those documents, sir. Routine verification. We're currently investigating irregularities in local real estate transfers involving elderly homeowners. Caleb blinked rapidly. Irregularities? Yes, Herrera said, flipping open his badge. Mind if I photograph these forms? No, of course, Caleb muttered, his voice shaking. While the investigator took photos, I reached into my apron and placed the small recorder on the table. The red light blinked to life again. I recorded our entire conversation, I said quietly, from start to finish. The click of the recorder button echoed like thunder. The ace revealed. Brianna's breath hitched. Evelyn, why would you... But I was already walking to the hallway cabinet. I opened it, pulled out the old safe box, and carried it to the table. I thought, I said calmly, that since we're discussing my assets, it might be helpful to have all the relevant information. I opened the box, spreading the documents on the table. The deed to Arroyo Cielo Ranch, the appraisal, the photographs. David adjusted his glasses, picked up the top page, and read aloud. Property, Arroyo Cielo Ranch, 512 acres, market value, approximately $4.2 million. The silence that followed was a vacuum. Brianna's jaw dropped. Caleb's face went ashen. Daniel just stared at the numbers as though they were written in another language. I looked at Brianna and smiled sweetly. You were so worried about me living in poverty, dear. How thoughtful. The collapse. Mrs. Hart, Caleb stammered. With assets of this magnitude, you'll need specialized advice. I already have it, I interrupted. Mr. Chen has handled my affairs for weeks. Every document you attempted to present here today is now evidence in a criminal investigation. Herrera nodded, calmly tucking the photographed papers into a sealed envelope. We'll be reviewing these for possible fraud and coercion. Brianna's voice cracked. We were just trying to help. Help? I said, standing. By selling my home without consent? By locking me in a facility so you could manage my money? She flinched, color flooding her cheeks. Daniel swallowed hard. Mom, we thought, the best for me? I finished. The best would have been to ask me what I wanted. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the recorder capturing every heartbeat. The dismissal. David placed a protective hand on my shoulder. I think this meeting is over. Herrera looked at Caleb. You'll be contacted by our office, sir. Caleb nodded weakly, gathering his briefcase with fumbling hands. Brianna grabbed her purse, her composure shattered. Daniel, she hissed, let's go. He didn't move. He just looked at me, truly looked. And in his eyes I saw something break open. Shame, regret, maybe love trying to crawl its way back. Mom, he whispered, can we talk later? I nodded slowly. Maybe. When they finally left, the air felt lighter. The door shut not with finality, but with freedom. Aftermath. Martha exhaled a laugh that was half joy, half relief. You did it, Evie. You actually did it. David smiled. Mrs. Hart, you handled that perfectly. Calm, documented, irrefutable. You're safe now. Herrera switched off his camera. And thanks to your recording, you've helped us expose a pattern we've been chasing for months. You may have saved more people than you know. I sank into my chair, the tension melting from my shoulders. For the first time in months, my home felt like mine again. Outside, the sun slipped behind the cottonwoods, casting long golden light across the floorboards. I looked at the safe box still open on the table, the deed shining faintly under the afternoon sun. Frank, I whispered, you were right. I had more than I imagined, and for the first time in years, I felt truly, fiercely alive. The morning after the unmasking, sunlight poured through my kitchen window, as if the house itself could finally breathe. The air felt different, cleaner, lighter. No perfume of deceit, no false laughter echoing through the walls. I sat at the table with my first cup of coffee and watched the steam curl upward. The cup trembled in my hands, not from fear this time, but from the quiet after a storm. The battle was over, but the silence that followed wasn't peace yet. It was the strange calm of a life rearranging itself. The legal echo David Chen called that afternoon. Mrs. Hart, he said, I just left the district attorney's office. Mr. Herrera has already filed a preliminary report. They're opening an investigation into Caleb Morton. Apparently your case isn't his first. Not his first? I repeated. Far from it. We found at least 4 similar complaints from seniors pressured into signing over property. Your recording gave us a direct trail. Without it, they might have kept going. I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, trying to absorb the weight of what he said. My small act, that little red blinking light in my apron, had become evidence strong enough to expose an entire fraud ring. Good work, Mrs. Hart, he added warmly. You didn't just protect yourself, you've probably saved others. When I hung up, I whispered to Frank's picture on the wall. We did it. The fallout. Within a week, the town was buzzing. You can't drag a notary, a daughter-in-law, and a $4 million estate into a scandal without tongues wagging. Neighbors I hadn't seen in months started stopping by just to check in. Some brought pie, others curiosity disguised as sympathy. But the strangest knock came that Thursday morning. It was Daniel. He looked older, the way guilt can age a person overnight. His voice was small when he spoke. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. "You're always welcome, Daniel. Sit down." He did, slowly, his hands twisting together. "They told me Caleb lost his license. Brianna's furious. She says I ruined her life." I looked at him carefully. "And do you think I ruined yours?" He hesitated. "No, I think. I let someone else ruin what mattered most." His eyes glistened, the same deep hazel as when he was a boy. "Mom, I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything," I told him softly. "Just listen." And I told him everything. How Brianna's words had stripped my dignity piece by piece. How every "for your own good" had really meant for my convenience. I described the night I found the deed, the morning I realized I'd have to fight back, and the moment at the table when he watched but didn't stop them. When I finished, he sat there in silence, tears sliding down his cheeks. "I thought I was protecting you," he said, his voice cracking. "I just didn't want you to struggle." "I know," I said, "but you stopped seeing me as capable. That's a kind of cruelty, too." He nodded slowly, shame written in every line of his face. Before he left, he said quietly, "Let me make it right, Mom. However long it takes." Brianna's exit. The next week, Brianna filed for divorce. The papers were cold and professional, just like her. Word reached me through Martha, who always seemed to hear everything first. "She's claiming half his assets," Martha said over tea. "Good luck," I replied with a dry smile. "David's already insured. Those are sealed under Daniel's name alone." I learned from the best. By the end of the month, Brianna was gone. Packed up, vanished from the neighborhood like a shadow at sunrise. They said she'd taken a job in Dallas, but I doubted she'd keep it long. Greed always needs new ground to feed on. I didn't feel triumph, only release. The healing routine. Life began to find rhythm again. Every Sunday, Daniel came by. No appointments, no folders, no hidden motives. Just him. At first, our conversations were awkward, cautious. He'd bring groceries or repair something small, as if repayment could come through errands. But I didn't need his penance. I needed his presence. So one morning, as we were repairing the porch swing, I said, "Stop trying to fix things. Just sit with me." He smiled sheepishly and sat down. We swung slowly in silence, the chains creaking above us, the desert wind carrying the scent of orange blossoms. "I used to love this sound," he murmured. "It reminds me of when Dad pushed me here after dinner." "It reminds me too," I said. "Back when I still believed some things never change." He looked at me, eyes wet. Maybe they can change back. Maybe. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a beginning. The other women. As the investigation unfolded, Mr. Herrera began connecting my story with others. He called one afternoon asking if I'd meet someone. Her name was Linda Cruz, a 73-year-old widow whose children had convinced a judge to declare her mentally incompetent so they could control her finances. She arrived at my house carrying a small suitcase and the haunted eyes of someone who'd been erased. "They said it was for my safety," she told me, her voice trembling. "But I can't even buy groceries without their permission. I feel like a prisoner." I made her chamomile tea and sat her in the same chair where I'd once cried alone. "Linda," I said, "I know exactly how that feels. You haven't lost your mind. You've lost your voice. But we can get it back." I called David. Within a week, he found multiple procedural errors in her case. 2 months later, Linda stood before a judge, her head high, her signature restored. When she hugged me afterward, she whispered, "You gave me back my life." I thought of Frank then, and of that night I'd sworn never to be silent again. Maybe this was what he meant by more than you imagine. The foundation's seed. Martha moved into one of the small guest houses on the ranch, not as a tenant, but as family. Together, we began hosting little gatherings for women like Linda, widows, single mothers, retired teachers. We met in the big kitchen, drank coffee, and shared stories that had once been buried in shame. David came by once a month to explain simple legal protections, powers of attorney, wills, what joint accounts really mean. We called it the Orange Blossom Circle. After the flowers that grew outside my window, the scent that had carried me through the darkest nights. At first it was just 5 women, then 10, then dozens. By the end of the year, journalists began calling. Social workers asked if they could partner with us. The DA's office even invited me to speak at a community event. When I stood on that small stage under the gymnasium lights, I looked out at a crowd of faces, young and old, men and women, and I realized how far the ripples had reached. I was once told to be quiet, I said into the microphone, to trust others to manage my life. But silence only protects those who exploit it. Speak, even if your voice shakes. That's how freedom begins. The applause was thunderous, but I didn't cry. I only smiled, knowing the applause wasn't for revenge. It was for reclamation. A son's rebuilding. Daniel became one of our quiet helpers. He handled tech stuff, helped design flyers, drove Linda to her follow-up appointments. He never asked for forgiveness again. He simply showed it, one quiet gesture at a time. One evening, as we packed up chairs after a meeting, he said, "You know, Mom, you built something here. Something good." I glanced at him. "We built it. You included." He shook his head. "You did. I just helped carry the boxes." I reached out and squeezed his hand. Sometimes carrying boxes is exactly how love starts over. He smiled, eyes soft. "Then I'll keep carrying them." The quiet night. That night, I sat on the porch alone after everyone had gone. The desert air was cool, the stars bright enough to touch. In the distance, the faint lowing of cattle mingled with the rustle of the wind through the orange trees. I thought about all the women who'd sat in my kitchen crying into teacups, and all the times I'd nearly given up myself. Life, I realized, wasn't about what people took from you. It was about what you built after they tried. Inside, the clock ticked steadily, marking each second not as a loss, but as proof that I was still here, still standing. The ripples of what happened hadn't just reached others. They'd circled back to me, too. And in their soft return, I finally felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Peace. The sun rose over Arroyo Cielo Ranch like a slow promise. The sky glowed with peach and gold, the fields shimmering with dew. Every morning I sat on the porch, a cup of coffee in my hands, breathing in the mingled scents of citrus blossoms and earth. 6 months had passed since the day I turned the tables. 6 months since I stopped being someone's target and started being my own protector. Yet what surprised me most wasn't how much had changed outside, but how much had changed inside. For the first time in years, my silence wasn't heavy. It wasn't fear. It was peace. The kind that comes after you finally said everything that needed to be said. The house that breathes again. The ranch had come alive. Where there was once only dust and storage, now there were people. Voices, laughter, footsteps echoing through the hallways of the main house. Women came from towns across New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona. Some were widows, some divorced, some simply tired of being ignored by their own families. They arrived trembling, clutching folders of documents, letters from banks, or eviction notices. Many came with nothing but a story and the desperate hope that someone would finally listen. We listened. We built something we called the Orange Blossom Sanctuary, a refuge, a legal and emotional workshop for women over 50 who'd been manipulated, defrauded, or simply made to feel small. The front parlor became an office where Martha and I sorted paperwork and made calls. The kitchen became our classroom, smelling of cinnamon rolls and determination. And the porch? It became our confessional. There, Over coffee and laughter, women began reclaiming their stories the way I had reclaimed mine. The stories that arrived. One morning, a small woman named Teresa stepped through the door with swollen eyes and a trembling voice. Her children had convinced her to sign temporary guardianship papers after her surgery. Weeks later, she discovered she no longer owned her home. "I just wanted them to love me," she whispered, clutching a crumpled tissue. I put a hand over hers. "Wanting love shouldn't cost you your name on a deed." Martha nodded. "You're not alone anymore." We called David Chen, who now served as our official legal advisor. He reviewed Teresa's case and found enough irregularities to nullify the transfer. By the next month, Teresa's house was hers again. The day she got the letter confirming it, she baked us a pie. "Apple," she said proudly, setting it on the table, "because my grandmother taught me that justice should always taste sweet." That afternoon I cried for the first time in a long while, not out of sadness, but gratitude. A wider circle word of the sanctuary spread faster than I ever expected. Local radio stations invited me to share my story. Then came newspapers, then television. At first I hesitated. I didn't want fame, I wanted change. But David said something that stuck with me. "Evelyn, your story doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to every woman who still thinks she has to keep quiet." So I spoke. I told the world about how a polite smile can hide predation, how manipulation can sound like concern, how silence is what abusers count on most. Within weeks, our small refuge turned into a movement. Retired nurses, social workers, and teachers volunteered. A law school in Albuquerque offered interns to help draft free wills and trusts. Even the DA's office collaborated, launching a community campaign called Protect Our Elders. We had no logo, no fancy slogan, just one sentence printed on every flyer. "Your signature is your voice. Use it wisely." The return of the sun. Daniel came to visit every Sunday, without fail. At first it was awkward. His guilt still hung between us like a curtain, but over time it lifted. He'd help unload groceries, feed the horses, or drive one of the ladies into town. Sometimes we'd work side by side in silence. Other times we'd laugh about old times. The way Frank used to sing off-key while fixing the fence, or the summer Daniel had tried to turn the barn into a rocket lab. One afternoon, as we were repairing a broken gate, Daniel paused and said quietly, "Mom, I think I finally understand what you went through." I didn't answer right away. I just let him speak. When Brianna talked about protecting you, I believed her. I thought love meant taking charge. But love isn't control, is it? "No," I said softly. "Love is respect. You can't protect someone while standing on their neck." He nodded, tears glinting in the sun. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve your forgiveness." Forgiveness, I said, "isn't something you earn, Daniel. It's something you grow into, and I think you're growing." That day, when he hugged me goodbye, it felt like the first real embrace between us in years. Not pity, not apology, but understanding. Letters from afar. Every week, letters arrived at the ranch, thick envelopes filled with shaky handwriting and hope. One was from Margaret in Chicago, who wrote, "After hearing your story, I told my daughter no when she asked to be added to my bank account. For the first time, I felt powerful." Another came from Estela in Buenos Aires. "Your courage crossed oceans. Thank you for reminding me that being old doesn't mean being silent." I kept those letters in a wooden box beside the fireplace, each one a small testament to how far a single voice could travel once it stopped whispering. Sometimes, when the weight of it all felt too much, I'd take one out and read it aloud to the women gathered at the kitchen table. By the time I finished, someone would always be crying, but not the same kind of tears that used to haunt this place. These were tears of awakening. The law and the legacy. With David's help, we began advocating for legislative reform. stronger protections for elder assets, easier reporting systems for financial coercion, and mandatory notary audits for large property transfers involving seniors. When the Elder Dignity Act passed in New Mexico the following spring, the local newspaper called it the Hart Amendment. I didn't ask for that name, but when I saw it in print, I smiled. Frank would have laughed. "You see, Evie," he'd say, "told you you had more than you imagined." The reflection. One evening, Martha and I sat on the porch, the air thick with the smell of orange blossoms. Fireflies danced over the fields. "Do you ever miss the quiet?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said, smiling. "But this kind of noise, laughter, stories, life, it's the best sound in the world." She nodded. "You know, we could expand. There's room in the old barn for another workspace." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe it should stay what it is. Not an organization, but a heartbeat. Something real." We watched as Daniel and a few volunteers loaded boxes of pamphlets into a van for an outreach trip to Las Cruces. The porch light caught his face, and for a moment I saw the little boy who used to chase fireflies with a mason jar. "Funny," I murmured. "The things that come back to you once you stop running from yourself." The Declaration. A month later, I was invited to speak at a national conference in Washington, D.C. The thought of standing before hundreds of strangers terrified me. But I went. When it was my turn, I walked to the podium, my notes trembling in my hands. The lights were bright, the room vast. "I was 69 when my daughter-in-law tried to take everything I owned," I began. "And for a while she nearly did. But what hurt most wasn't the greed. It was the silence. Mine. I let myself believe that politeness was strength, that being quiet was dignity. It wasn't. Silence is what keeps the wolves fed." I paused, looking out at the faces watching me. Today, I stand here at 70, surrounded by women who refuse to stay silent. And if my story reaches even one more person, if it helps one more mother, one more grandmother say no, then every tear was worth it. When I finished, the applause came not like thunder, but like rain. Steady, cleansing, endless. Epilogue. The porch at dawn. Now each morning begins the same. I sit on my porch, coffee in hand, watching the sun climb over 500 acres of freedom. The ranch hums with life, roosters crowing, laughter in the distance, Martha's voice calling out instructions. The women here call me Miss Evelyn, but sometimes they call me Mom. I don't correct them. On the railing beside me lies a stack of letters waiting to be opened. Somewhere in the world, another woman has found the courage to raise her voice. And that, I think, is the truest legacy. I glance up at the sky, whispering into the wind, "You were right, Frank. I was stronger than I believed." Then I set down my coffee, stand, and walk back inside, the scent of orange blossoms following me like a promise. A reminder that even the quietest voices, once awakened, can shake the earth.